Mr. Wheeler, and he'll move us into the second phase of our meeting, discussing our election debrief.
Yeah, thanks, D'Amelia, and thanks everybody. Very special thank you though to Brother Tyrone Johnson and Brother Cliff Ford. Very enlightening. We're going to segue into a discussion about politics. A couple of quick facts. I think most of you know that according to the public record, 31% of Detroit went to the poll. 530,000 registered voters. We're being told publicly that 31%. I just don't believe Detroit's numbers largely because people are migrating out so fast. I would suspect we're over 50% of those people who still live here who are registered to vote, but we've got to go by the records because it takes a process to purge. Wayne County has 1.3 million registered voters. 535,000 went to the polls, and the number being reported publicly is 38% of Wayne County. Macomb County has 620,000 registered voters. 267,000 went to the poll. So Macomb is reporting 42% voter participation on through Election Day. And Oakland County has 993,000 registered voters, and they're saying 449,000 went to the polls, so 48%. 31 for Detroit, 38 for Wayne County, 42 for Macomb, 48% for Oakland. I'm just looking at the Tri-County area. Is it irresponsible on our part, though, to shoulder Detroit with an unusual burden? Because I hear a lot of people saying if Detroit had gone to the poll, what I just articulated highlights the fact that over 50% of Democrats did not go to the poll. Over 50% of registered voters did not go to the poll. So is Detroit shouldered with the added burden because of the misery index in our community? I'm asking you guys, and I've asked Rick Blocker, who is a very important political operative across our community, and Dion Williams. Greg Roberts could not be here. He wanted to be here, but he's not feeling well. And I'm sure after the grueling impact of those campaigns, he probably needs another week or so to just decompress. And I know the NAACP is nonpartisan, but I want us to be able to very openly talk about Democrat versus Republican. We got to assess what happened. Is this a well-deserved loss?
Yes.
Do you follow what I'm asking? A lot of things. I know Ed. I know it's going to be hard for Ed to sit here, but I'll get you in strategically.
You are being picked on because statewide, 625,000 Democrats stayed home. Okay, and 200,000 Republicans stayed home.
Right, yeah.
Well, I'm not convinced though that everybody who says they're a Democrat is a Democrat.
That's right.
That's another part of the discussion. But I'm gonna start with Rick Blocker. Take a couple moments, Rick, and just highlight what you see and what happened and what do we need to do differently. Are black folk too loyal to the Democratic Party? Should we be thinking something different?
Give me that line.
Go ahead. Yeah, right.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me out. Just a couple of things. I think one thing we have to do is realize it's going to be 45 days before we actually have the actual numbers. So a lot of the information that we're being told now is based on exit polls. And even though they can have some degree of accuracy, we still should wait to see and get the proper numbers in. The second point,
So are you saying the results could change?
we just need to have the right information. It's not going to change the actual vote. We're not saying the vote was tampered, but we want to make sure how many people voted and how many people didn't vote and who those people was. We do know one thing for sure was a 93% vote for Shower in Detroit, which seems to be remarkable.
That's huge.
Given the fact that he was a relatively unknown candidate from the western part of the state with the time period we had. So the people who did vote in Detroit was convinced that the state was going in the wrong direction under Rick Snyder. Now, we didn't have the numbers, but let me just talk about the numbers for 1 second, because I totally agree. It's impossible for us to have 530,000 registered voters. If you look at our 5 to 18 population, which we can document this part of the school system, the last estimate was at around 170,000. If you look at the 0 to 5 population, you have to add that to that number. And then you have to look at the people who don't vote in Detroit. We have some religious groups that don't vote, and we have some unregistered voters. And the last census analysis that took the 4 years since the last census in consideration had us at around 685,000 people. So the real number of registered voters in Detroit is somewhere around 400,000 or maybe even less.
Or even less. That's a good
And
point.
we need to not get upset. I mean, we need to realize that we can do better, and we should do better. Anytime you get 280,000 people out in 2012, you can't take any relief in the fact that we had a higher percentage or just as high as the rest of the state when we know we could have did better. So I do appreciate that fact, and I think we need to acknowledge it because we always get ashamed. We say 31% in Macomb County outvoted us. Macomb County didn't outvote us. Wayne County didn't outvote us, but we should have did a lot better. But a couple of things, a couple of observations. I was wondering why so many people were saying around the country that they was upset with the president. And if you look at the economy, we have had constant job growth, unemployment. We're in a one-state recession here in Michigan, let's be clear about that. But around the country, unemployment is down. The example that was given on MSNBC was because people are not making as much money. Now, if you're not making as much money, and I'm a labor guy, I'm going to say it, so if anybody don't know it, they know it now. Having lower wages is a byproduct of not having unions being able to collective bargain. And how can the Republicans who are mostly favoring big business, how can they get credit? I mean, people are voting all over this country against their interests. If you're voting for, I know you're nonpartisan here, but when you voting for people who represent corporations, I mean, I got some money invested. I love it when the stock market up, but that usually means that working folk are being screwed. Because a lot of corporations' philosophy is the only reason I pay you minimum wage is because it's against the law not to. But this election really illustrates that we have to do a better job convincing people to vote against because they're voting against their own self-interest. And we have to change from being a presidential voting state to a midterm state. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. I really don't know why so many people would show up and vote in a presidential election and then not vote in a midterm election. But I know we're not no blue state. I get tired of hearing people say we're a blue state. We purple at best, and we're leaning towards red. And all these statistics about how many Democrats we have, to your point, if they really a Democrat, then why they're not voting? So we have to do a better job. We have to have people out there articulating our viewpoints better. And we have to realize that 93% of what people hearing on TV is against what we believe in as far as working folk. And we don't have the money. So we got to do a better job of being out in the street. And one of the observations I make is doing more retail politics. The last week of the election, we went to a bowling alley, and when I mentioned it to the Mark Schauer campaign, they said, well, why are you going to Allen Park? Well, all the good bowlers in Detroit don't bowl in Detroit because, and I don't want this to get on TV and they say, well, you dogging the bowling alleys in Detroit. We really don't have but two. But they got out the Thunderbolt bowling alley. Mark Schauer, Greg Roberts was with us, and it was 300 people. And a lot of those people was from Detroit. And they got to touch and talk with Mark Schauer. And it was such a great event. I think we need to do more of that. We need to go to Home Depot where people shop at. We need to go to these grocery stores. And we have to go, and I know Brother Keith would agree with me on this point, we need to go in the hood and talk to our people there and really stop them from voting against their interests, because it's amazing to me that when you have one side who is so clearly against you, I mean, we know in this lame duck session, prevailing wage is probably gone. They're talking about taking away collective bargaining rights for public employees. everything they're doing is against working folk, but we still voting in record numbers for the Republican Party. And I don't know what to say about males. I mean, I don't know why 16% more, according to the exit polls, voted for Rick Snyder. And I gotta be, I'm a union guy, but I'm not stupid. I know a lot of union folk didn't vote and follow their leadership.
That's right.
And our whole survival, I tell you, labor is an endangered species right now. We don't like to talk about it truthfully, but we in the private sector, we only 7%. Now you wonder how 7% of the population could get all the blame for everything, when 93% of the people in the private sector don't even know what a union is, or they get the benefit of the union contract, but they don't have the rights. They can't collect a bargain. When they go up on their health insurance, they don't have no grievance procedure. It just happens. So we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of programs we need to get instituted. But one thing we have to do is start training our people better. We have to engage them earlier. Next year shouldn't be an off year. They say, well, 2015 is an off year. We should start this day going out training people, engaging people in the community, and working with them. We cannot continue to do what we're doing and expect a different outcome. So I'm here to say we're going to know 45 days exactly who voted and who didn't vote. I'm disappointed that we didn't have more people in Detroit vote. I'm disappointed that we lost Macomb and Oakland County by the numbers we lost those counties by. And we got to do better as Democrats, or we're going to have to suffer. And I'm just saying Democrats because I think the Democratic values represent working folk a lot more than what the Republicans do. So I appreciate coming out. I appreciate you guys listening, and we just got a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Rick Locker. Thank you, Rick. That's very insightful. I'm gonna ask Deon Williams to make his way up, and then we're gonna open it up for a lot of feedback, because Katrina Turnbull had a major role in the campaign. I'm sure she's gonna have some insight, and the good bishop out from Western Wayne, Barry and Berlin Brown. I know Ed Serpol is hard to keep his seat because he's so intricately woven, and even Rebecca Thompson, I'm sure you've got some enlightened perspective on this campaign. So we're going to engage after we hear from Deon. He was on a winning campaign. How'd you guys win, and why'd they lose? Why?
Well, Hester, I yield to what Rick said. I mean, even though that, Warren Evans, he won the Wayne County exec's position, and Richard Bernstein won Supreme Court Justice, Rick is absolutely correct about the landscape of the political scene here in the city of Detroit. Everything that I was going to speak about, he said it.
I got you.
Because there is a lack of enthusiasm in the African American community in the city of Detroit about getting out to vote. People feel disenfranchised. People feel disconnected. Why is that? There are so many other things that we need to do in our community to educate the people and to let them know what's really going on, what's really going on, honestly. So I'd rather have a conversation and open up the floor for questions and answers than just to speak and then give my opinion about it.
Well, I appreciate that. But while you're here, though, you were actively and intricately woven into the Bernstein campaign.
Yes.
Any unique insights? What did you guys? I know it helps that you could put a few $1 million into it. I understand that.
Well, I would say this. I would say this. I would say this, that even though the NAACP is nonpartisan, what we need to do in our community is to develop PACs.
Right. Yes.
To actually put money behind candidates that we believe. I remember a couple years ago when we sat over at in a restaurant, and you asked me, Deon, who are the African American candidates that we can put on a ballot, that we could put into public office, and then who are the individuals that we could get money from to help support those candidates? Where can we develop those PACs that when we have a Deborah Thomas that is being jockeyed for the Supreme Court, and she doesn't get the financial backing to go behind her. Where can we go to as an alternative to get that money to help her? Where do we go for an alternative to help the Godfrey Dillards to get to those to that level as the Secretary of State? Because those were winnable candidates, and they didn't win because they didn't have the financial backing. They didn't have the name to be put out there in the forefront, even though we had a 40% undecided when it came to the Supreme Court. And Deborah Thomas's number, she was at a 12% approval rating, but there was still a 40% undecided. And Viviano only had 35% of the approval rate. So she could have overcame that if the money was behind her.
Right.
If she had name recognition. And Ed, I don't know if those numbers are exact, but that's what I read into
Well,
it.
the key thing is the fact you're talking about PACs. And I created 2 PACs with Judge Thomas. The last 2 weeks of the campaign, we were on radio. If anybody heard Detroit radio, Judge
I
Thomas
heard
never
it.
had
Excellent.
radio.
Excellent.
We went to non-traditional sources to get the money, not from the party, to put Judge Thomas up. So we had to do that because we could not depend on the party for the money.
Right.
You know that because we were
Right.
working together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I mean, those are the things that I think that we need to do as collectively is come together and put our resources behind candidates that better benefit us.
Let's
And
open
this
it up
is-
for a second.
I
I
mean,
know Keith
simple-
wants to
simple as
jump
that.
in, but let me just say this too, and Cliff, I'm gonna get back to you. I mean, we're gonna have some robust interaction.
And I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. The reason being, you have a sound name of recognition that has been out there for 20, 30 years.
That's right. Yeah, we know that.
And I mean, and in the media, in the forefront, whether my name is Dion Williams and I know Keith Williams, that name Williams is all the way out there. And, you know, I respect the Bernstein family. They brought me in and they wanted me to advocate on their behalf, and I did that. But that name recognition is resounding across the state of Michigan, across this country.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, but I remember just a few short years ago, Bernstein wanted to run for AG, and that didn't work.
Right.
So,
It was at the party level, though.
That was
Never
at,
made it
absolutely,
outside the
Yeah,
absolutely,
I got you.
absolutely. That was politics within inside of politics.
I understand. I just want the
So-
record to be clear. And Keith, I'm glad you joined us. What's your thinking, Keith? Just a quick perspective, or a question, statement, or question. Yes,
They
sir.
only tell people quick when they know how long.
There's a disconnect from the politics of the party and the people that live in the city of Detroit and throughout the urban agenda. Case in point, I just showed her a figure. We did a thing, me and Chris
Jackson, yes.
a bunch of us got together and had a game plan to get out to vote in the city of Detroit.
Right.
You have SIC codes, which is your job descriptions that, you know, businesses use. From salons to barbershops to dollar stores, those folks are not voting. So there's a disengagement from a communication standpoint to those folks, okay?
Yes, sir.
You have, in the census I just showed Katrina, in 2010, listen to this, there's 104,000 people in those SIC codes are not voting. 104,000.